Hey everyone, how's it going? So today I just wanted to do a quick list on some of the terrible Pokemon beta names that we could have gotten in Red and Blue. In case you didn't know already, Red and Blue had a beta version, and the beta version had very different names than what we ended up getting. I don't know if these were intended to be the final names, but I do know that these are terrible. So sit back and enjoy me complaining about how awful these names would have been. So starting off at number 10, we have Magnemite and Magneton. Now, I think Magnemite and Magneton don't have great designs personally, but the names are pretty cool. Coil and Recoil are just dumb. Like, they don't even make any sense. Like, I get that you're going for an electromagnetic coil, but that doesn't even apply necessarily to Magnemite. We don't see an electromagnetic coil. It's just a couple magnets attached to a giant metallic eyeball. And Magneton is really lazy. It's just 3 Magnemite. So I don't get what makes it so Recoil. Like, where does the re come in? It doesn't even make sense because the Japanese name was Coil and Rare Coil, which I don't get either. But at least Rare makes more sense than Re. Like, what does Recoil have to do with Magneton? I don't know, just kind of weird. At number 9, we have Dodo, and this is one where I think one little change made it way better. In Japanese, Dodo was called Dodo, so the original name was also Dodo, and I think it's a little too on the nose. Like, yes, Dodo is clearly based on the flightless dodo bird, but Dodo says a lot more about it. It says it's a 2-headed bird based on the dodo, and it's unique and it rolls off the tongue really nicely. When you think of Dodo, you might not think of Dodo. When you hear Dodo, you think of Dodo. And I'm not talking about you think of Dodo just because that's what its name ended up being. What I mean by that is a lot of other games like Pokemon have the mistake where they name their creatures things we already have in the real world. Pokemon is good at making the names remind us of things in the real world while being unique in that we remember them. Dodo is a great example of that. Moving on to number 8, we have such classics as Eggstream and Eggscute. By the way, Eggscute was originally Executor, and Eggstream was Eggscute. Now, I don't know what makes Eggscute so Eggstream, nor do I know what makes it an Execute or an Executor, because those sound like killy things, and they don't look like particularly murderous Pokemon to me, I don't know. But they're way better than Eggstream. Like, Eggstream is so mid-90s, it would have gotten really dated and really silly. Like, I don't know, it probably was dated and silly the day the beta version came out, which is why they changed it. But Eggscute, not Execute by the way, just Eggscute, it's not even comfortable to say. So I guess what they decided to do is switch around the names, give Eggscute to Execute, and just add Tor to the end. Better than what they could have done. So for number 7, we have the fossil Pokemon, whose original names are just the worst. So we got such classics as Lantis and S, and Cargo and At. And I intentionally didn't read them in the way they wanted you to read them, because the way they think you should read them is S Cargo and Atlantis. But no, because we have a Pokemon just named S and a Pokemon just named At. A pun doesn't work between 2 different Pokemon because they're not going to be on screen at the same time. You just send out your Kabuto and you're like, go At. And might I point out that Atlantis doesn't even make a lot of sense? Like, why? Because Kabutops is like an underwater continent? Like, I really don't get it. At least Escargo is a snail. But it's funny, they did this well with Muckargo, a magma escargot, but no, just calling it S and Cargo, that's awful. Aerodactyl, they made a small change, but I still think it's for the better. It was originally called Terra, like P-Terra, but they ended up calling it Aerodactyl, which highlights the fact it flies and is a pterodactyl. Yeah, not like, you know, rocket science there with that one, but way better. But man, the original 4 fossils, those would have been just some awful, awful names. Okay, so at number 6, I'm sure you know this already, that Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan are based on Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan, but the beta designers just decided to call them Lee and Chan. A little too on the nose. I really don't know what Hitmon means at all, but Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan sound like fantasy creatures, while Lee and Chan are just names. I get it that in North America there are not too many people named Chan, even though I actually know a few people with that last name. Just not a good name for a Pokemon. It's not memorable at all. The Hitmon makes a big difference. Now at number 5, I get to do what I've wanted to do on like a ton of these lists, and that's talk about Kadabra, because it's my mascot and I love Kadabra, but originally it was going to be called Pocus, and Abra was going to be called Hocus, and Alakazam was always Alakazam, but like, I don't know if we watched different children's cartoons, but it was always like some guy in like Transylvania going like, Abracadabra, Alakazam, like that's what I remember, and I always got that as a kid. It was never Hocus Pocus, Alakazam. Like, that doesn't even sound right. So I'm not really sure why they didn't just go for the abracadabra thing originally. I also think Hocus and Pocus on their own sound dumb. Like, I don't know, the cuss just doesn't have a nice ring to it. The at the end of Abra and Kadabra kind of rolls off the tongue a little bit better. I don't know, I could be really biased here because these are my favorite Pokemon, but I'm just going to go with those original names were terrible. I think I can do that. Now, if you wanted just some awful names that are way too on the nose, how about Karate, Kung-Fu, and Judo at number 4? So yeah, the Machop line didn't get great names to start. Not that the Machop names necessarily make too much sense, but they're way better than just putting karate with a dash in between. I mean, can you imagine people like, oh, karate? No, actually, it's karate. Like, okay, guys, that's just bad. I also don't know why those specific martial arts styles were picked for those Pokemon. I don't think Machop looks like particularly karate-ish, but whatever. I mean, those are just awful. Like, those are ones I look at like, man, thank goodness we didn't get those. I would have cringed really hard. Okay, so at number 3, we have a name I just don't get and I think is really bad. Probably why it's at number 3, and that's Nye and La. Now, if you thought coughing and wheezing when I said that, then congratulations. You understand this and I don't. Like, I really don't know why Nye and La were names. Like, what's the pun? They're really short names, and like, what is it supposed to stand for? Like, nitric gas? No, I don't get it. I've actually spent like a good 5 minutes staring at these names, thinking about what they could have been going for, and I don't know. I think at this point, they were just running out of names, so they just started putting random sounds together, and they're like, yeah, people will just call it Nyla, or Nye and La. Those are names, or maybe someone was allergic to nylon. I don't know. Well, I do, because as soon as I started editing the video and I put these in all caps, I realized that NY is New York and LA is LA. Get it? Because they're polluted. I'm so unimpressed. I'm not even American. And this sort of offends me. Like, is this a political point? Is it just a joke? It's not funny. It's just dumb. Like, I don't need my Pokemon names to forward environmental causes. And it's not like it's Beijing where there's smog over the air. I mean, New York and LA aren't that polluted, guys. I mean, wow. Just wow. That's bad. Anyway, moving on to number 2. We have Pokemon I really like with names that are pretty good. So we got Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar. Now, Gengar, I don't really know what it means, and it is just its Japanese name, but man, the original names were way too generic. So we got such great ones as Spirit, Spectre, and Phantom. Now, I get these aren't as funny as some of the earlier ones on the list, but these are just so lazy. I think I can count on my, 2 hands the amount of games I've played with a creature named Spirit and Spectre. And Phantom. I mean, those are so generic. And thank goodness someone was like, hey, maybe we shouldn't call them something that could get confused with 10 other franchises. And for the better. Now finally, at number 1, I had to pick a Pokemon that's one of my favorites, with a name I really like, and with a beta name that is just so 90s it hurts. And that's Strike, with a Y, because Ys are cooler than Is, and the Pokemon in question is Scyther. Now, I don't really know why Scyther was called Strike. I think it's because Scyther looks cool, and Strike sounds cool. But no. No. Strike sounds like something that kids wanted to name their dog back when I was in grade 2. They just thought it sounded like a cool name. But nowadays, I just think of baseball, but it just doesn't fit Scyther, at all. And why the Y? I have to, is it because it's cool? And that hurts so much. You think really a Y makes the name that much cooler? If you called it Strike with an I, people are like, oh, that Pokemon's lame. Yeah, sure, it's a praying mantis, friggin' swords on its hands, but that's lame as hell. But if you give it that Y, they're like, oh my god, Strike with a Y? That thing's the coolest thing I've ever seen. Oh my goodness. No, okay. I don't really know who they were trying to fool with this one. But a lot of these names, this is why you have a beta process. You sit down and you're like, okay, this is really trying too hard. And that's all for this list. I didn't get to talk about Skullkraken, which was a great name that was dropped. Gyarados was originally called Skullkraken, and I will never forgive Game Freak for this. But yeah, if you enjoyed the list, let me know. I plan to release new videos every few days or so stay tuned and take care.